session. Uh, Namaste and a very good evening to all esteemed members, fellow chartered accountants joining us today for another enriching session of Golden Charcha. I'm CA Rashi Sonthalia and I have the privilege of coordinating today's session. Golden Charcha has truly emerged as a golden initiative or by EIRC of ICAI, bringing cutting-edge knowledge directly to our screens. This initiative reflects our commitment to continuous professional development and ensuring that every member of our fraternity stays equipped with the latest tools and techniques. Before we proceed, I would like to express a heartfelt gratitude to CA Vishnu Kumar Tulsian, our dynamic chairman of EIRC, whose visionary leadership and commitment towards professional development and excellence has made initiatives like Golden Charcha possible. Our topic for today is the 2025 GST 9 and 9C updates, and our special addressee for today is CA Mayank Kumar. I would like to welcome you, sir, and I would like to hand over the mic to you so that you can introduce the topic.
Thank you so much, Rashi. Good evening, esteemed colleagues. I am honored to speak at this Golden Charcha session organized by EIRC of ICI. Today's topic from confusion to clarity, the 2025 GSTR 9 as well as the 9C. This session aims to demonstrate the recent changes and challenges which is being faced by the colleagues in annual GST returns and reconciliation statements for the financial year 2024 and 25. So I will just brief a little, and then our speaker for the day, C. Abhisek Tibrewal ji, will incite us with better clarity and practical experiences. So as you all know that GSTR 9 is the annual return that consolidates all the monthly and quarterly returns filed throughout the year, while 9C is the reconciliation statement certified by the chartered accountants or the cost accountants, validating the figures in GSTR 9 against the audited financial statements for the financial year 2024-25. This process has been become more detailed due to several critical updates which has been brought by the GST Council as well as CBIC, which are effective from September as well as October of 2025. First, let me decode the latest changes which has been happened in the GST 9. The annual return form now mandates enhanced reporting of the input tax credit, requiring taxpayers to separately disclose ITC reversals and reclaiming under multiple GST rules such as rule number 37, 37A, 38, 42, and 43. The forms GSTR 9 now auto-populate key figures from the GSTR 1 as well as GSTR 3B and 2B. However, this convenience also demands careful reconciliation by the taxpayer because any mismatch or inaccuracy will lead to scrutiny or assessment. A notable update is formalizing the disclosure of any late fees or interest payable for delayed filing. Moving on to the practical side, how do we ensure accurate filing and this complexity amid this complexity? Uh, a stepwise approach is vital for all of us. So before filing your GSTR 9, we should reconcile our outward supplies and advances declared in GSTR 1 against GSTR 3B very precisely. And then we can cross-check inward supplies received, especially which has been received under the reverse charge, and it can avoid discrepancies in ITC which has been claimed. The reconciliation audit under GSTR 9C calls for a robust documentation trail. Financial statements, GST returns, invoices, credit notes, etc. all should be harmonized and preparation of the audit certification, which needs to be signed by the chartered accountant. So now we can use the technology which like AI, GST compliance software or macros enabled sheets, which can help in streamlining and matching the flagging inconsistencies and which will help in reducing the errors. So now coming to something which is of the topic for the day, but which is very important in the current scenario. Like the main question which arises nowadays is what will happen to the stocks on the date of change, which after the implication of GST 2.0, which was effective from 22nd of September. So as per the CGST Act, the supply of goods with the date of issuance of invoice or the date of supply, date on which the supply is made. So as per that, any stock which has been supplied after the effectiveness of the GST 2.0, the new GST rate will be applied to that. As well as the second thing which comes is uh, that the ITC which we have claimed against that stock, what to do with that? So as per the provisions, whatever ITC we have claimed for the stocks as on the date of the rate change, the ITC will remain as usual, and we can claim it against the output tax liability without any timeline for the same. There won't be any timeline for the expiry of that ITC. And one more thing, like there has been some items or some services which became exempt after the rate cut. So for that, if there is any input which we have claimed, we need to reverse the same. So with this, I would like to hand over again to the Rashi for the continuation of the today's session. Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I would like to introduce a speaker for today, C. Abhisek Tibrewal, a distinguished tax analyst, management consultant, and corporate trainee with over a decade of such experience in multi-level indirect tax consultancy, due diligence, impact assistance, and litigation support. He has been invited to address more than 350 seminars and symposiums on GST across India, reflecting his deep expertise and contribution to the professional community. He's a partner at Uttam K. Garg and Company and serves as a director in IDT at AK Tibrewal and Company, actively guiding organizations on indirect tax matter. We are honored to have him with us today and looking forward to benefiting from his knowledge and insights. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rashi. Thank you, Mayank, for the brief introduction. Thank you, EIRC, for this opportunity. So my topic being an update on annual return to be filed for 2025. I would request all the attendees to please make this session interactive, and you can just post in your queries in the chat box as and when you feel that you need to ask something. I'll share the screen. Is the screen visible now?
Yes, the screen is visible.
So, as Mayank rightly pointed out about GST 2.0, with the GST 2.0, we are seeing that there are a lot of queries which primarily revolve around ITC. If any of the attendees have any queries, I'll request them to post the same, which we can take after the session on short. Today is a very short session on annual return and 9 and 9C, because it mainly caters to the changes that have been announced in this year, and also to the recent FAQs. Very recently, an FAQ has been issued on filing of 9 and 9C, wherein they have clarified about how to depict primarily the input tax credit figures for the financial year. Before we get into the details, let me tell you, let us know who is required to file annual return. Annual return is required to be filed. When I say annual return is GSTR 9, and a reconciliation statement is accompanied by the annual return, which is 9C. In first 2 years of implementation of GST, that is 17-18 and 18-19, this 9C was required to be certified by a chartered accountant. However, today that requirement of certification from a chartered accountant or cost accountant is no more there, and only a self-certified reconciliation statement is to be furnished by the SSE along with annual return wherever applicable. Talking about the applicability, the annual return is applicable to be filed or required to be filed by every registered person other than an input service distributor, a person paying tax under section 51 or 52, which is tax deductor or e-commerce operator, a casual taxable person, and a non-resident taxable person. primarily speaking, every registered person who is required to pay outward tax is required to file his annual return, where his aggregate turnover exceeds 2 crore rupees in a financial year. This exemption has been provided recently by notification number 15 by 2025. For all the earlier years, similar exemptions were provided. With effect from 24-25, this exemption has been made permanent until and unless withdrawn. So from now onwards, for each year separately, exemption from filing of annual returns for persons having aggregate turnover less than 2 crores is no more required. This notification straight away gives an exemption for all the persons whose aggregate turnover in any financial year is up to 2 crore rupees is not required to file any annual return in form GSTR 9. And speaking about 9C, 9C is applicable where the aggregate turnover is more than 5 crore rupees. So 9 is only required where aggregate turnover is more than 2 crore rupees, and 9C is required where the aggregate turnover is more than 5 crore rupees. And when I speak about, when I say aggregate turnover means the turnover of all the GSTINs included and consolidated under the same PAN of a person. So if a company has 10 GST registrations, one may have a turnover of 10 crore rupees, another may have a turnover of 2 crore rupees, third may have a turnover of 0 rupees, nil turnover. Still, he is required to file GSTR 9 for all the registrations, even with the nil turnover, since under the same PAN, all the GSTINs included, if they cross the aggregate turnover of 2 crore rupees, annual return is required to be filed. And one more thing, aggregate turnover also includes exempt supplies and non-taxable supplies. So exempt supplies as in interest income. If interest income and taxable income both cumulatively cross the limit of 2 crore rupees, a person is required to file the annual return as well. Getting into the form of return, GSTR 9 is the annual return form. It is divided into primarily, majorly 6 parts and 19 tables. Part 1 comprises of table 1, 2, and 3. These are auto-populated by the system, and if you're using the offline utility, you need to fill it down. Otherwise, if you're filing it, seeing it through the online portal, in the online portal, this is pre-filled. This is basically the primarily details of financial year, GSTN, and legal name of the SSE. Now, part 2. Here starts the exercise and hard work for filing of annual return. Again, I'll need to mention that GSTR 9 and 9C are the only mode of interaction for an SSE, available for an SSE, through which they can connect to the department. So once you want to discuss anything or disclose anything with the department, you need to do it only through GSTR 9 and 9C. There is no other part. So it is very important that, and you must be aware that all the provisions relating to demands and assessments have a thin line of difference between disclosed facts and non-disclosed facts, or misstatements or voluntary statements. All these things can be very well be taken care by filing proper GSTR 9 and 9C. GSTR 9 does not have any field to disclose anything over and above the required things in the form, apart from wherein the reasons for reconciliation are required to be made in GSTR 9C. So in 9C, you have all the opportunities to disclose anything which you have mistakenly or inadvertently missed out to declare in your monthly returns, or in addition to all the monthly returns, you need to disclose something else. There is an option to also attach documents, and all these facilities would enable you to have a secured stand before the future authorities in case of any probable litigation in front of the higher authorities, that you had a bona fide belief or the SSE was not having any intention to evade any tax, and this might safeguard you a whole lot of penalty and penal provisions and tax demands. So that is the seriousness of GSTR 9 and 9C that we need to take care of. Plus, any mistakes done throughout the year, the last opportunity to correct is filing of GSTR 9 and 9C. If I want to come clean after the whole financial year, and since my audits are also done by the month of September, I suppose, and then we have the opportunity to file our GSTR 9 and 9C in the next 3 months, that is the last quarter of the next financial year. We need to make proper use of this opportunity and make all the reconciliations perfectly. We need to disclose all the details that are required by the law, and non-disclosure, incorrect disclosure, or even limited disclosure, or disclosure which is not proper or as not up to the mark as required by the law, again lets you contravene the provisions of the GST Act. So it is very important that all the required details in GSTR 99C are properly filled in, and the 9 and 9C are properly filed by the SECs. Coming to the first table where the exercise of disclosures are required to be done by an SEC, Table 4, Part 2 of GSTR 9. These are the details of outward and inward supplies on which tax is payable by the SEC who is filing the annual return. So by outward supplies, I mean all the sales, and by inward supplies, I mean all the purchases wherein the SEC is liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. So table, and plus it also caters to the requirement of disclosure of advances. Now which advances, I'll come on to that. First part, supplies made to unregistered persons, B2C. B2C supplies are to be disclosed under table 4A. Similarly, B2C supplies are required to be disclosed under table 4B. All export supplies with payment of tax are required to be declared under 4C. With payment of tax, as I think you must be aware that exports under GST can be made by two ways. One is with payment of tax, wherein first I pay the outward tax by maybe by utilizing my ITC or through my cash ledger, and then I have an option to claim refund. Second part is exports without payment of tax, wherein I file an undertaking before the GST authorities that I would be exporting these and these goods or services without payment of tax, and I would be undertaking that once I complete the formalities of export, I would disclose the same before the authorities, and if I have any underlying input tax credit, I again have an option to claim refund thereof. Fourth part is supplies to SEZs on payment of tax. Similarly, export is supplies to other countries, and when we supply to SEZ, similar provisions are applicable. We can either supply with payment or without payment under the letter of undertaking, LUT is said. Fifth is deemed exports. Deemed exports are exports which are generally made against advance authorizations or EPCG kind of any promotional schemes or something like that. Next are advances on which tax has been paid but invoice has not been issued during the financial year. So in GST, advances are liable to tax only if received against services. Against goods, advances are not at all liable to tax at the time of receipt of the advance. So here we are speaking about advances on which tax is liable to be paid, but invoice has not been issued. Supposedly there is a circumstance where I have received an advance in the month of May, and the invoice against the same is raised in the month of June. So that again becomes a supply, maybe a B2C supply or B2C supply. So that I would have already disclosed under 4A or 4B. But there might be circumstances where during the year I have received certain amount as advance, but the invoice is yet to be issued. And this advance is against supply of services. So in such cases, this amount of advance is required to be disclosed under 4F. 4G requires you to disclose the inward supplies on which tax is to be paid on reverse charge basis. All the supplies on which tax is required to be paid under RCM are required to be disclosed by the payer, that is the recipient of the goods or services, under 4G. 4G1 is a newly added row which has been introduced with effect from financial year 23-24, that is the last financial year, wherein we are required to disclose supplies on which e-commerce operator is required to pay tax as per section 9(5). There are certain supplies on which e-commerce operators such as restaurant services, restaurant delivery services, wherein the e-commerce operators, for example, Zomato, is required to pay tax on the deliveries made through to you through a restaurant, from a restaurant through Zomato, wherein Zomato is required to pay the tax. In such cases, Zomato is required, the e-commerce operator is required to report its liability under this part. Neither under B2C, neither under B2B, they are required to disclose their liability, which they are paying as an e-commerce operator under 4G1. Now, once we see the tables 4A to 4G1, this is the total liability which can be said to be payable by a person who is registered under GST. As such, apart from this, all these rows, there are no requirements or no disclosures wherein liability to pay tax can be detailed or disclosed under GSTR 9. All liabilities payable by a person are only required to be disclosed under Part 2, Table 4 of GSTR 9. These liabilities may be reduced by way of issuance of credit notes, may be increased by way of issuance of debit notes, may be amended to reduce or so to increase through amendments or reduce through amendments. The credit notes are required to be disclosed under 4I, debit notes under 4J, amendments under 4K and 4L. Up till financial year 2021, the tables 4I to 4L were optional. And SSC had an option either to disclose the net supplies, net of credit notes, debit notes, and amendments under table 4A to G. But with effect from 21-22, the disclosure of credit notes, debit notes, and amendments is mandatorily required to be made under table 4I to 4L. So this is what we need to take care now. Coming to the next part. Table 5. Table 5 is disclosure of outward supplies on which tax is not payable. That is zero rated supply or exports without payment of tax, supplies to SEZs without payment of tax, supplies on which tax is to be paid by the recipient on reverse charge basis. Remember, in table 4, we had disclosed our liability on our inward supplies, wherein we were required to pay tax under RCM. Similarly, under table 5, the provider, supposedly I am a transporter and I have transported certain material for a factory, and my transport services are taxable under RCM. So as a transporter, on my amount, the factory is liable to pay tax. The factory would disclose the amount of my invoice under table 4, and as a transporter, I would disclose the same under 5C. Again, for e-commerce operators, since last year, this has been mandatorily introduced, supplies on which tax is to be paid by the e-commerce operator. Now, as we discussed, Zomato was required to disclose its liability under 4G1. Similarly, the restaurant would be required to disclose its liability under 5C1. Exempted supplies, nil rated supplies, and non-GST supplies are required to be disclosed under table 5DEF. Now, again, this bifurcation has an option. You may either disclose all the supplies as exempted. You could have disclosed all the supplies as exempted until financial year 2021. But with effect from 21-22, non-GST supplies are mandatorily required to be disclosed separately, other than apart from exempted and nil rated. And exempted and nil rated can be consolidatedly shown as exempted at the option of the SSC. Meaning thereby to say that the segregation between exempted and nil rated is not so important as the segregation between non-GST and exempted supplies is. Non-GST supply is to be mandatorily disclosed separately from exempted and related. Again, the credit notes, debit notes, and amendments are issued against the exempted supplies which are disclosed above are required to be disclosed under Table 5 G, H, I, and H, I, J, and K. Now, once we see all the disclosures of Tables 4 and Table 5, we will get to the total liability that is payable, or total outward supplies which is payable, outward liability which is payable on our supplies made by an SSC. And also, when we see that the column 4G at 5N, you might note that total turnover including advances, the formula specifically mentions that it is 4N plus 5M minus 4G minus 4G1. 4G and 4G1 are liabilities under RCM and liability to be paid by e-commerce operator. Basically, this turnover would be matching with your profit and loss account. ये turnover is or required to be reconciled with the turnover as per your audited financial turnover, audited financial statements in GSTR 9C. Now, the most talked about or most discussed upon topic of 9, Table 6. Table 6 is the disclosure of ITC, input tax credit, in various forms and formats availed by an SSC during the financial year. There is a big change introduced in Table 6 from being made effective from this financial year itself, which is the introduction of row 6A1 and 6A2. There are certain more changes also which we'll discuss, and the FAQs which we would be discussing, they also revolve around Table 6 itself. So Table 6 is basically the details of input tax credit availed by an SSC during the financial year, wherein at Table 6A, the total amount of input tax credit availed by the SSC is auto-populated, accumulated and auto-populated from all the GSTR 3B filed during the financial year. तो हमने जो एक साल में जितने भी GSTR 3B फाइल किए हैं, उन सब में हमने जितना भी इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट लिया है, उन सबको टोटल करके जीएसटी की सिस्टम ऑटोमेटिकली आपको बताएगी कि टेबल 6 में आपने कितना अमाउंट 3B में टोटल लिया है. Now, there is a scenario when we avail input tax credit during a financial year. This ITC may pertain to the particular financial year or may pertain to the previous financial year or years also. सपोजली मैं अगर 24-25 की बात करूं तो यहाँ पे मैंने जितने इस साल में मेरे गुड्स और सर्विसेज रिसीव किए हैं उससे पर्टेनिंग उसका अंडरलाइन जितना आईटीसी है वो मैं क्लेम कर सकता हूँ. दूसरा हो सकता है लास्ट ईयर में मैंने कुछ गुड्स रिसीव किए, गुड्स खरीदे थे जो मुझे मिले इस साल में. सपोजली इन March 24 I purchased certain goods on 31st March supposedly, and those goods reached my godown on 1st April or 2nd April of 24. What happens is, as per section 16, I can only avail ITC when the goods are received by me. So my goods are received in April 24, that is the financial year 24-25, but the invoice is of financial year 23-24. So in such cases, the ITC pertaining to the financial year 23-24 would be availed by me in the financial year 24-25. So the ITC of preceding financial year availed in the financial year other than ITC reclaimed in 37 under Rule 37 or 37A. तो रूल 37 के बारे में हम बाद में बात करते हैं. पहले अब हम ये मानते हैं कि जितना आईटीसी मैंने इस साल में क्लेम किया है जो कि मेरे पिछले साल से पर्टेन करता था, दैट आई हैव टू सेपरेटली डिस्क्लोज अंडर रो 6A1. 6A1 में जो मैं डिस्क्लोज करूंगा वो 6A से माइनस हो जाएगा, एंड अल्टीमेटली the net ITC of the financial year would be arrived at 6A2, which is my total ITC claimed under 3B less the ITC pertaining to previous financial year. Net comes to my net ITC for that particular financial year. This table was long awaited and recommended by all the people who deal into GST, all the associations, all the committees, and at last the government has introduced this particular row, and it is a very welcoming change, and this would let us avoid a lot of litigations which were pertaining to this particular issue. GST 990 में डिस्क्लोजर सही नहीं हो रहा था, जो अब इस डिस्क्लोजर के बाद सही होना चाहिए. Coming to the second part, once we get the net ITC availed during the financial year, which is 6A2, इसका डिटेल देना है. अब इसके अंदर में क्या क्या है, this ITC contains, this particular amount contains ITC of being availed on inputs, input services and capital goods. Apart from these, this might be under the category of ITC, might be of normal goods or services under forward charge, might be of reverse charge, might be of import, might be of input service distributors, or some other situations. So this bifurcation is required to be given from our books of accounts. Firstly, we need to bifurcate the inward supplies which are under forward charge, which is to be bifurcated under inputs, input services and capital goods. For the financial year 17-18 and 18-19, these were optional to be declared, and all the inputs could have been, all the input tax credits could have been declared under the head inputs. But with effect from 1920, the declaration of ITC claimed on capital goods separately is mandatory. तो आपको capital goods का ITC segregate करना ही पड़ेगा. इनपुट और इनपुट सर्विसेज का आप चाहें तो एक साथ इनपुट्स में दिखा सकते हैं, और आइडियली आपको सब अलग अलग करके दिखाना है. तो फॉरवर्ड चार्ज के लिए पहले निकाल दीजिए इनपुट, कैपिटल गुड्स, इनपुट सर्विसेज. देन वी कम टू रिवर्स चार्ज मैकेनिज्म. अगेन रिवर्स चार्ज के अंदर में देयर आर टू पार्ट्स. वन इज रिवर्स चार्ज सर्विसेज और गुड्स रिसीव्ड फ्रॉम रजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर्स एंड फ्रॉम अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर्स. तो अगर मेरा अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर है तो मुझे सेल्फ इनवॉइस इशू करना पड़ता है. उन सब केसेस में मुझे वो डिटेल्स को बाइफरकेट करना है. अगेन सिमिलरली फॉर इनपुट एंड इनपुट सर्विसेज आप एक साथ इनपुट्स में दिखा सकते हैं, बट कैपिटल गुड्स को अलग से ही दिखाना पड़ेगा, और रजिस्टर्ड अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर्स को भी मैंडेटरीली बाइफरकेट करना पड़ेगा. द इजीएस्ट वे टू बाइफरकेट रजिस्टर्ड एंड अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर्स इज टू यूज योर जीएसटीआर 2A और 2B. 2A 2B में आपको अगर कोई आरसीएम सप्लाई दिख रहा है तो वो आदमी रजिस्टर्ड है, नहीं दिख रहा तो आदमी मोस्ट प्रोबेबली अनरजिस्टर्ड है, या फिर वो अपना रिटर्न सही ढंग से फाइल नहीं कर रहा है. आप उसको बाइफरकेट करिए और इनपुट, कैपिटल गुड और इनपुट सर्विसेज को इन टू पार्ट्स, on reverse, on supplies received from registered suppliers and on supplies received from unregistered suppliers separately दिखा दीजिए. And this would conclude the part of 6B, C and D. Next comes the input tax credit being availed on import of goods. जो import of goods में हम tax pay करते हैं at time of clearance, उसको भी inputs और capital goods में separately bifurcate करके दिखाना है. Similarly, import services का दिखाना है. Input tax credit received from input service distributors अलग से दिखाना है. ISD से जो हम ISD recently has been made mandatory from this financial year. So this is a very hot topic, and ISD से जितना भी input tax credit आपके पास आ रहा है वो आपको अलग से दिखाना है. Table 6H, amount of ITC reclaimed under the provisions of the Act. आपको याद होगा हमने जब पहले देखा तो यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ था other than ITC reclaimed under Rule 37 or 37A. So GST provisions require you to reverse the input tax credit of invoices, the payment of which is not made to the supplier within 180 days. रूल 37 बोलता है कि अगर आपने अपने सप्लायर को 180 दिन के अंदर फ्रॉम द डेट ऑफ इनवॉइस पेमेंट नहीं किया है तो आप उसके अगेंस्ट में जितना इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट क्लेम किए हैं वो भी रिवर्स कर दीजिए. तो अगर मैंने 180 दिन में पेमेंट नहीं किया तो मुझे आईटीसी रिवर्स करना है, बट जिस दिन मैं वो सप्लायर को वापस से पे कर दूंगा, आई शैल हैव द ऑप्शन टू रीक्लेम दैट क्रेडिट. This reclaiming of credit is required to be disclosed under table 6H. Any amount which is reversed earlier but reclaimed now under the requirement of Rule 37, that is non-payment to supplier within 180 days, एंड सेकेंड रीजन इज, अगर आपका सप्लायर जीएसटीआर 3B फाइल नहीं करता है, सप्लायर जीएसटीआर 3B फाइल नहीं करता है विद इन द सितंबर ऑफ सब्सिक्वेंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर टू द फाइनेंशियल ईयर अगेन इन विच द इनवॉइस बिलोंग्स, आपको आईटीसी रिवर्स करना है. That ITC again can be availed at the time of filing of GSTR 3B by the supplier, which is Rule 37A. ये दोनों प्रोविजंस के अंदर में अगर आप कोई आईटीसी रिक्लेम करते हैं, यानी जो पहले रिवर्स कर चुके थे और इस साल में रिक्लेम कर रहे हैं, वो आप टेबल 6H में दिखाएंगे. प्राइमरीली ये समझना है कि मेरे पास वो आईटीसी है जो ऑलरेडी कोई इनपुट या इनपुट सर्विसेज में डिक्लेयर था, बट आज किसी भी टेक्निकल कारण से मैं उसको रिक्लेम कर रहा हूं, तो मुझे वो टेबल 6H में दिखेगा. Ultimately, my total ITC bifurcated into various parts would come under table 6I, and ideally the difference between I and 2A must be 0. अगर यहाँ पे difference आता है तो we need to ascertain reasons. If we are unable to ascertain reasons, we must be ready to receive notices against the same. जीएसटीआर ट्रान 1 एंड ट्रान 2 ट्रांजिशनल क्रेडिट हुआ करता था फॉर रिविजन्स 22-23 में था. इस साल में until unless there is a judgment of any particular high court in your favor, you are not required to disclose anything under tran 1 tran 2, as because you must not be availing any credit under tran 1 or tran 2. 6M is availment of ITC under special circumstances, which is ITC 1, 2, 2A. तो कोई भी मर्जर अमलगमेशन या फिर टेक ओवर अगर हो रहा है, उन सब केसेस में अगर कोई आईटीसी ट्रांसफर हो रहा है, वो सब 6M में आएगा. द सब टोटल कम्स टू K फ्रॉम K to M comes under 6N, and total ITC availed by an SCC, this is gross ITC availed before reversals, is reflected under 6O. I hope I'm clear. There are no queries as of now in the chat box. Maybe I expect a thumbs up अगर आपको सब कुछ समझ आ रहा है तो. अगर कोई query है तो please post the queries. A short chat would be very encouraging for us. Now coming to table 7. Table 7 में अब आपको reversals बताने. Table 6 में all the credits availed is being reflected, and under table 7 all the credits which are all the reversals of ITCs are to be reflected under table 7. Reversal under table 7 is required to be bifurcated under rule 37, 37A, 38, 39, 42, 43 and 17(5). For this 37 we already discussed. 180 दिन में अगर पेमेंट नहीं होगा तो आपको 37 में रिवर्स करना है. सप्लायर अगर जीएसटीआर 3B नहीं लगाता है तो 37A में रिवर्स करना है. अगर सप्लायर जीएसटीआर 1 और 1 टाइमली नहीं लगाता है और आपके पास 2B में कम्युनिकेट नहीं होता है तो 38 में आपको रिवर्स करना है. फॉर NBFCs एंड बैंकिंग इंस्टीट्यूशंस रूल 39 में आपको 50% ऑफ द क्रेडिट रिवर्स करना है. 42 gives an option. 42 is the rule 42 prescribes the procedure for reversal of common ITC by suppliers engaged in supplying taxable as well as exempted supplies on inputs and input services. Similarly, for capital goods, rule 43 is applicable. तो अगर एक supplier exempted as well as taxable supplies में डील कर रहा है, कॉमन आईटीसी को उसको रिवर्स करना पड़ता है. जो इनपुट और इनपुट सर्विसेज में जो रिवर्स करना है वो रूल 42 में करना है, और जो कैपिटल गुड्स में करना है वो रूल 43 में करना है. 17(5) इज द डिटेल्स ऑफ ब्लॉक क्रेडिट्स. जो क्रेडिट ब्लॉक्ड है अगर आप उसको रिवर्स कर रहे हैं, जो कि आज के दिन में जब हम 3B भरते हैं, इट इज मैंडेटरी टू फर्स्ट अवेल एंड देन रिवर्स. तो जो हम अवेल करके रिवर्स कर रहे हैं वो सेक्शन 17(5) को हम यहाँ पे दिखाएंगे. कोई ट्रान 1 ट्रान 2 का क्रेडिट है या अपार्ट फ्रॉम ऑल दीज रीजंस अगर कोई और रिवर्सल है तो आप टेबल 7H में दिखा सकते हैं, FGH. नाउ टेबल 6 में हमने जितना आईटीसी अवेल किया था वो आ गया. टेबल 7 में हमने जितना रिवर्स किया वो आ गया. अवेलमेंट माइनस रिवर्सल्स, नेट आईटीसी अवेल्ड इज टेबल 7J. ये आपका नेट आईटीसी है जो कि आपके 9C में रिकंसाइल होगा. अब टेबल 8 इज द ओनली टेबल जिसकी वजह से न्यूमरस नोटिसेस वेर इशूड. जितना भी आप नोटिसेस देखेंगे प्रीवियस ईयर्स का, वो डिफरेंस इन टेबल 8 की वजह से आ रहा है. ASMT 10 में ऑटोमेटिकली जनरेट हो रहे हैं नोटिसेस, यहाँ पे जो डिफरेंस अंडर 8D आ रहा है उसके वजह से। हालांकि गवर्नमेंट हैड प्रीवियसली अनाउंस की टेबल 8D का डिफरेंस इज अ स्टैटिस्टिकल फिगर और इसके बेसिस पे कोई एक्शन नहीं लिया जाएगा, बट जितने भी ASMT 10 है जो सिस्टम जनरेटेड नोटिसेस हैं वो सब यहाँ के डिफरेंस को कैटर करते हुए लिया जा रहा है। व्हाट इज दिस? बेसिकली ITC एज पर 2B और आपका 3B में जो नेट ITC अवेल्ड है उसका रिकंसिलिएशन है, ग्रॉस ITC अवेल्ड है जो 8A में GSTR 2B के फिगर्स ऑटो पॉपुलेट हो जाएंगे। आपने 6B में जो बाइफर्केशन दिया था, 6B में बाइफर्केशन किसका किसका था? इनपुट्स, इनपुट सर्विसेज एंड कैपिटल गुड्स ऑन फॉरवर्ड सप्लाई। फॉरवर्ड चार्ज सप्लाईज मैकेनिज्म में जो टैक्सेबल है वही 2B में दिखना चाहिए, वो सारे के सारे फिगर यहाँ पे आ जाएंगे। इन दोनों के बाद अगर आपने इस साल का कोई ITC सब्सिक्वेंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर में लिया है, यानी कि ऐसा कोई इनवॉइस है जो इस साल आ गया बट ITC आप नेक्स्ट फाइनेंशियल ईयर यानी 25-26 में लेना चाहते हैं, उसको आप यहाँ पे डिस्क्लोज कर दीजिए। तो 8A minus 8B minus 8C will give you 8D। मेरे 2B में जितना अमाउंट दिख रहा है उसमें से मैंने क्लेम इस साल कितना किया और अगले साल कितना किया, वो दोनों को माइनस करके अगर कोई नेगेटिव डिफरेंस आता है, दैट मींस यू हैव क्लेम्ड सर्टेन ITC which is not reflecting in your 2B, and as per law you cannot claim any ITC which is not reflecting in GSTR form GSTR 2B. So this would create a difference which would be liable to be addressed by the SEC as and when department comes and asks you about the same. If there is a positive difference, अगर 2B में ज्यादा दिख रहा है, सपोजिटली मैंने ड्यूरिंग द ईयर कुछ क्रेडिट्स ऐसा या कोई ऐसा इनवॉइसेस है जो मेरे थे ही नहीं और ऐसे ही रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहे हैं, मैंने उसका ITC क्लेम भी नहीं किया, रिवर्स भी नहीं किया, in those cases there will be a positive difference and this positive difference might be disclosed by you as not availed or ineligible. So both the parts, ITC available but not availed and ITC available but ineligible में आप disclose कर देंगे तो ये ITC आपका lapse हो जाएगा. Apart from this ITC which is required to be reconciled with GSTR 2B, there is an ITC which is ITC of IGST paid on import of goods. ITC paid IGST paid on import of goods is to be disclosed under 8G और आपका जितना IGST credit availed on import of goods है ड्यूरिंग द फाइनेंशियल ईयर वो ऑटोमेटिकली ऑटो पॉपुलेट हो जाएगा GSTR 3B से। अगर आपने कुछ जितना पेमेंट किया उसमें से कुछ अगले साल लिया है तो वो आप टेबल 8H1 में डिस्क्लोज कर दीजिए, अदरवाइज जो डिफरेंस आएगा दैट वुड लैप्स इन द करंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर एज इट वाज अवेलेबल बट नॉट अवेल्ड ऑन इंपोर्ट ऑफ गुड्स। Table 9 is details of tax paid as declared in returns. So basically tax payable is auto-populated from all the GSTR 3B net liability payable और आपने कितना ITC से और कितना कैश से पेमेंट किया है वो ऑटो पॉपुलेट हो जाता है। टैक्स पेबल अमाउंट इज एडिटेबल बाय द SEC। आप टैक्स पेबल कई बार क्या होता है कि जो 3B में हमने नेट लाइबिलिटी डिस्क्लोज की है विच इज आफ्टर रिवर्सल ऑफ इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट वो नेगेटिव हो सकता है, इसलिए टैक्स पेबल को एडिटेबल इन्होंने दिया है, आप एडिट करके उसमें एक्चुअल टैक्स पेबल दे सकते हैं। टैक्स पेड थ्रू 3B ऑटोमेटिकली आएगा इधर थ्रू कैश और थ्रू ITC। नेट टैक्स पेड एंड टैक्स पेबल इसका जो डिफरेंस है दैट इज अगेन एक्सप्लेनेबल इन ऑल सर्कमस्टेंसेस व्हेन आस्क्ड बाय द डिपार्टमेंट। Apart from this, any disclosure of liabilities or credits which is made in the subsequent financial year, मतलब मान लीजिए आपने 24-25 की कोई लाइबिलिटी है जो 25-26 में डिक्लेयर की, आपको वो टेबल 10 में बताना है। अगर कोई ऐसी लाइबिलिटी है जो आपने गलती से यहाँ ज्यादा पे कर दिया था उसको नेक्स्ट ईयर में जाके रिड्यूस किया है तो वो टेबल 11 में बताना है। अगर इस साल का कोई ITC आपने ज्यादा ले लिया और नेक्स्ट ईयर में आप जाकर के उसको रिवर्स कर रहे हैं that has to be disclosed under table 12। अगर कोई ITC है जो आपने इस साल नहीं लिया और आप नेक्स्ट ईयर जाके अवेल करना चाहते हैं that has to be disclosed under table 13। So 10, 11, 12, 13 are the parts wherein details of input tax credit and supplies of this financial year which is taken care in subsequent financial year is required to be disclosed over here। टेबल 14 अगर आप यहाँ पे आपके हिसाब से कोई डिफरेंशियल लाइबिलिटी पेबल आता है which is of course only table 10 that has to be disclosed under table 14। और अगर नेट लाइबिलिटी टेबल डिस्क्लोज करना है तो 10 माइनस 11 वो यहाँ पे डिस्क्लोज होगा। Table 15 is optional for SSCs to file. This is basically a particulars of demand और जो outstanding refunds वगैरह statistical data है. This is not yet made mandatory. Similarly, table 16, which is supplies received from composition taxpayers, deemed supply under 143, goods sent on approval basis, not yet returned. ये सारे details भी optional है, अभी mandatory नहीं किए गए हैं। HSN सप्लाई आपको आउटवर्ड सप्लाई का HSN समरी देना मैंडेटरी है। इफ द टर्नओवर एनुअल टर्नओवर इज मोर देन 5 करोड़ रुपीस यू हैव टू गिव फॉर 4 डिजिट लेवल 6 डिजिट लेवल, और इफ इट इज लेस देन 5 करोड़ रुपीस 4 डिजिट लेवल। द प्रॉब्लम इज इन मोस्ट केसेस 4 डिजिट HSN लेता नहीं है सिस्टम, तो वी सजेस्ट आप 6 डिजिट लेवल पे ही सब डिस्क्लोज करिए, अदरवाइज वो एरर रहता है। HSN summary of inward supplies is not yet mandatory. And lastly, in table 19 लेट फीस पेबल एंड पेड अगर वो रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहा है तो आपको पे करना पड़ेगा। दिस इज ऑन GSTR 9। कमिंग टू 9C, 9C is basically the reconciliation statement which is accompanied with the annual return filed in GSTR 9। 9C में क्या है? 9C again is one form divided into 5 parts and 17 tables. Again, part 1 and up to table 4 is financial year, GSTN and legal name, which is auto-populated. Table 4 is name of the act if you're liable to audit under any act. So this is something which I saw that there are errors made in certain disclosures by certain people. Usually SSCs forget to mention that अगर उनका टैक्स ऑडिट हुआ है तो दैट ऑडिट इज अंडर इनकम टैक्स एक्ट। आप वहां लिख सकते हो इनकम टैक्स एक्ट 1961 के अंदर आप ऑडिटेड है। अगर कंपनी हो और कंपनीज में ऑडिट हुआ है तो कंपनीज एक्ट लिख दीजिए। अगर आप दोनों में है तो आप दोनों चूज कर सकते हैं, कंपनीज एक्ट एज वेल एज इनकम टैक्स एक्ट, आप दोनों भी लिख सकते हैं। दैट इज योर ऑप्शन। What is 9C requiring? 9C is basically requiring you to reconcile your turnover as per your audited financial statement with the turnover as declared in GSTR 9। तो यहाँ पे आपको अगर when there are multiple GSTNs under the same PAN, तो audited financial statement तो एक बन रहा है, अगर branch wise नहीं बन रहा है तो उसका टर्नओवर को आपको इंटरनली डिसाइड करना है, ट्रायल बैलेंस या फिर अनऑडिटेड सेल्फ सर्टिफाइड बैलेंस शीट्स बनवा के, सेल्फ सर्टिफाइड PLs बना करके आपको हर GSTN वाइज टर्नओवर सेग्रीगेट करना है। नाउ एट 5A you have to give your turnover for that particular GSTN as per the books of accounts, and there are various adjustments and these are very simple adjustments जो कि हम एक BRS जिस तरीके से बनाते हैं, अगर कोई अनबिल्ड रेवेन्यू है तो उसको ऐड कर दीजिए, अनएडजस्टेड एडवांस है तो ऐड कर दीजिए, डीम्ड सप्लाई यानी कि स्टॉक ट्रांसफर वगैरह है जो बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स का पार्ट तो नहीं है बट GST रिटर्न में उसके ऊपर टैक्स जाता है इसलिए उसको ऐड कर दीजिए। वैसे ही क्रेडिट नोट्स अगर है तो उसको रिड्यूस कर दीजिए, ट्रेड डिस्काउंट्स है उसको ऐड कर दीजिए जो क्योंकि डिस्काउंट बुक्स में है बट उसके उस अमाउंट के ऊपर GST दिया हुआ है। वैसे ही अनबिल्ड रेवेन्यू अगर आपने बिगनिंग ऑफ द ईयर का ऐड किया है तो एंड ऑफ द ईयर का माइनस करना पड़ेगा। अनएडजस्टेड एडवांसेस ड्यूरिंग द बिगनिंग ऑफ द ईयर में तो वो एडवांस पे पहले ही मैंने टैक्स दे दिया था तो मैंने उसको ऐड कर दिया, एंड ऑफ द ईयर में मैंने पहले टैक्स दे दिया तो ऐड कर दिया, बिगनिंग ऑफ द ईयर में जो है उसके ऊपर तो मैंने लास्ट ईयर टैक्स दे दिया था तो मैं उसको रिड्यूस कर दूंगा। क्रेडिट नोट्स जितने होंगे जिसके ऊपर GST रिडक्शन परमिसेबल नहीं है उससे मेरा बुक्स का टर्नओवर तो गिर जाएगा बट GST की लायबिलिटी बढ़ी हुई है, GST में टर्नओवर बढ़ जाएगा इसलिए मैं उसको ऐड कर दूंगा। ये सारे एडजस्टमेंट्स करके आई विल अराइव एट माय टर्नओवर एज पर GSTR 9 जो कि हमने टेबल 4 और 5 के बाद लास्ट में देखा था। उसके अलावा उसमें जो इस साल के टर्नओवर को नेक्स्ट ईयर हमने डिस्क्लोज किया जो कि टेबल 10, और इस साल का टैक्स जो हमने नेक्स्ट ईयर रिड्यूस किया जो कि टेबल 11 था उसको प्लस और माइनस करेंगे तो टेबल 5Q आएगा, टर्नओवर डिक्लेयर्ड अंडर एनुअल रिटर्न 5N + 10 - 11। दिस नीड्स टू मैच विथ योर टर्नओवर एज पर टेबल 5P। आपने ऊपर जितने डिटेल्स दिए उसके हिसाब से आपका टेबल मैच होना चाहिए। अगर मैच नहीं होगा तो देयर वुड बी एन अनरिकंसाइल्ड टर्नओवर एंड वी नीड टू एक्सप्लेन द रीजंस why this amount is unreconciled. Here you can give n number of reasons and explanations कि ये difference क्यों है। Yeah, that is table 6, reasons for non-reconciliation. Non-reconciliation is a डायनेमिक फील्ड जो आप अपने हिसाब से चेंज कर सकते हैं, उसमें आप अपना रीजंस भर दीजिए। कमिंग टू टेबल 7 में अगेन जो आपने पहले जो टर्नओवर भरा है उसमें से एग्जेम्प्टेड, जीरो रेटेड विदाउट पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स और लाइबिलिटी टर्नओवर ऑन विच रिसिपेंट इज लायबल टू पे टैक्स अंडर आरसीएम, यानी कि वो आउटवर्ड सप्लाई जिसके ऊपर आपको टैक्स नहीं देना है वो सब रिड्यूस कर देंगे, तो नेट टैक्सेबल टर्नओवर आ जाएगा। ये अगेन नेट टैक्सेबल टर्नओवर टेबल 4 से मिलाया जाएगा। अब जब टेबल 4 से मिलाएंगे, इफ देयर इज एनी अनरिकंसाइल्ड डिफरेंस दैट यू अगेन नीड टू एक्सप्लेन अंडर टेबल 8। टेबल 9 इज द रिकंसिलिएशन ऑफ टैक्स पेड। आपने जितना टैक्स अमाउंट पे किया है उसको रेट वाइज बाइफरकेट कर दीजिए। जीएसटीआर 9 में हमने जहां पे टैक्स पेबल दिखाया था टेबल 9 में, ये टेबल 9 टू टेबल 9 मैच होगा। वहां पे जितना पेबल था उसके बीच में, तो जितना आपके बुक्स के हिसाब से पेबल है और जितना आपने पूरे साल में पे किया है उन दोनों के बीच में अगर कोई डिफरेंस है दैट वुड बी रिफ्लेक्टिंग ओवर हियर एंड दैट नीड्स टू बी रिकंसाइल्ड एंड एक्सप्लेन्ड। लास्टली टेबल 11 है ऑन आउटवर्ड सप्लाईज। अगर कोई एडिशनल अमाउंट आपको पे करना है वो आप यहाँ पे पे कर सकते हैं। पहले ऐसा डिस्क्लोज था कि आप कैश से ही सिर्फ लाइबिलिटी एडिशनल पे कर सकते थे, बट फ्रॉम दिस ईयर दे हैव इंट्रोड्यूस्ड और क्लैरिफाइड दैट आईटीसी से भी आप टैक्स पे कर सकते हैं। तो टू बी पेड थ्रू कैश और आईटीसी हैज बीन allowed from this financial year itself. Apart from outward supplies, we need to reconcile the input tax credit also. So input tax credit हमारे बुक्स में जितना है वो हमको टेबल 12A में बताना है। इस साल का आईटीसी जो इस साल में जो हमने आईटीसी लिया है बट वो लास्ट ईयर में बुक्स में था, वो हमको टेबल 12B में दिखाना है। नेक्स्ट ईयर का आईटीसी हम क्लेम कर रहे हैं बट इस साल के बुक्स में है, वो हमको टेबल 12C में दिखाना है। सो बेसिकली माय बुक्स आईटीसी प्लस मेरे बुक्स में लास्ट ईयर था बट इस साल मैंने लिया वो ऐड हो गया, इस साल बुक्स में है नेक्स्ट ईयर मैंने लिया वो रिड्यूस हो गया। नेट आईटीसी क्लेम्ड एज पर बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स आ जाएगा टेबल 12D में। ये हमको जीएसटीआर 9 से टेबल 7 के बाद जो हमने 7J में नेट आईटीसी क्लेम दिखाया था वो उसके साथ मैच करेगा। एंड इफ देयर इज अगेन एनी अनरिकंसाइल्ड आईटीसी वी नीड टू एक्सप्लेन द सेम अंडर टेबल 13। Table 14 is expense wise bifurcation of input tax credit. This is still optional. अभी भी हम अगर expense wise ITC का bifurcation नहीं दे पा रहे। However, I do not understand the reason कि हम SSCs के पास ये क्यों नहीं है। This is very basic thing to find out. आपने किसके ऊपर ITC लिया ये तो आपको पता ही होना चाहिए। तो I suggest if you have data, please collate, क्योंकि आप अगर departmental audit आ रहा है, explanation आ रहा है, तो this is very basic detail required by the department. So we should collate the details as required here, but as of under law, this is not mandatory or this is optional. If there is any unreconciled difference in ITC again, and you need to pay tax on the same, the tax payable may be declared over here. That is about 9 and 9C, and any additional liability due to non-reconciliation can be disclosed under 9C. That is all from my end on 9 and 9C. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Over to you, Rashi and Mayank.
Thank you. If anyone has any doubts, they can just type it in the chat box.
Thank you, Mohit ji. I think Rashi, there are no queries. Mohit ji has just mentioned that it was a good session.
So I think we should end the session here. So I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to C. Abhisek Tibrewal and CA Mayank Kumar for taking time out from their busy schedule to deliver such an insightful and informative session. Your detailed explanations, practical integrations, and clear guidelines on recent changes in annual GST compliances have truly enriched our understanding. The way you simplified the complexities and addressed the real-world reporting challenges will surely help all professionals present here in ensuring accurate and compliant final filings. So thank you both of you for joining us today for the session and for such a wonderful explanation to the problems.
Thank you so much.
I think we have one doubt, if you can just,
Yeah,
Yeah.
here in
uh,
chat.
where will temporary ITC reversal appear in GST 9?
So temporary ITC reversal, basically, if it is reclaimed, temporary, if it is reclaimed in the same financial year, it will not reflect in, it will first reflect in 6B, which is जो आप bifurcation दे रहे हो input services का, and then the second part would reflect under 6H, which is reclaimed, and the reversal would reflect under other reversals 7 में. वैसे ही आपने जो रिवर्स नहीं किया, रिवर्स कर दिया और रिक्लेम नहीं किया, वो सिर्फ टेबल 7 में दिखा दीजिए अदर रिवर्सल्स के अंदर में. बट अब टेम्पररी किस कारण से है, अगर आप 42 में टेम्पररी कर रहे हैं तो भी आपको 42 के अंदर दिखाना पड़ेगा. अगर 37 में टेम्पररी रिवर्सल किया है तो वो 37 में जाएगा. अगर और कोई रीजन से टेम्पररी रिवर्सल है तो अदर रीजन में जाएगा.
Okay, thank you so much.
यू आर वेलकम.